Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Quantum Healthy Podcast. Today we have Amanda Conta, and she is a neuroanatomist. She has her PhD in neuroscience and 5 publications from SUNY, the State University of New York. And she's also a mother of 2 and an applied quantum biology coach and a naturopath in training, or have you finished that?
Not yet.
In training. Awesome. Well, please add to your accomplishments, and then we can just start with you sharing your story and how you found quantum biology.
Oh, well, thank you for having me on, ladies. This is really neat and special. And Andia, I'm really proud of how you're doing this. You and I were in the same cohort in the Applied Quantum Biology
Yep.
certification course, and it's been really cool to see you just grow and bring this all together. So I just wanted to say kudos and it's awesome. So thank you. I'm excited to be here. Yeah, I started out as a musician actually in my early, teens and 20s. I went to college for that. And so I'm a classically trained musician. Music composition was my degree, but then I really pivoted hardcore and came to the States. I'm originally from Argentina. Came to the States to do graduate work in neuroscience. And that's how I got into research, did research for a number of years, looking at animal models of spinal cord injury. I did a couple of years of research in biotech, looking at stem cells. I always wanted to go back to teaching though. So between starting a family and my desire to teach, I kind of left the research and got onto the teaching rotation faculty at the medical school here in Syracuse, where I live, SUNY Upstate Medical University, which is part of the State University of New York system. So I did that for a number of years, got into the Gross Anatomy lab, did a neuroanatomy was my passion, the brain. At the moment I started learning about the brain, I realized, okay, there was no turning back. It's really fascinating to begin to put pieces together. Yep. And so we had a couple kids. We homeschooled the kids. I was actually listening to Nico Kennedy's with you guys from the other day, and it was so cool to listen to her approach to life and homeschooling. And it's so beautiful to see that because I was just reflecting this morning on this idea that healing and learning are our natural default state. We have what we need already in us to heal. That's been my impetus during the last several years, and what really got me onto the quantum train. But really and truly, the way I got into this was by choosing to go down the homeschool route many years ago, and daring to trust that we were doing the right thing and that the kids have what they need in order to learn, that they are not going to learn more or less because of whatever I do or whatever any teacher does. They have it. We are learners. We were born learners. That's how we spend the first however many years of our lives, and all our lives, unless it's interrupted, right? And that will tie in nicely to the whole idea of primitive reflexes later on. We'll talk about that. But I just love the parallels between healing and learning because we have what we need. All we need to do is just take a step back, get out of the way, and trust that the thing will happen. So anyway, let's see, fast forward however many years, I resigned from my teaching job at the medical school and went back to school myself for traditional naturopath training. I'm still working through that because it's a self-paced online course. And I get distracted with all these other rabbit holes. It's very hard, but very fun. And
I
so
can imagine.
the 2 big rabbit holes that really have brought it all together are primitive reflex integration using rhythmic movement training and applied quantum biology. And so little by little, all of the things are coming together for this practice that I've been building in the last 3 years, working with people, loving every minute of it. I always said I would never work with people. I would never do clinical work. Blah, blah, blah. Here I am. And it's beautiful how life just pushes you in and it works. And when it's the right time, it's the right time and things flow. So here I am.
That's so cool. Well, I think, you and I have chatted offline before, and you know that I was actually on the trajectory to be a physical therapist. So I've always been obsessed with this kind of stuff as well. And, ended up being an addiction counselor, which is work I absolutely love. So I'd love, as we talk about this today, to, yeah, how might this apply to people in addiction recovery, and then also in recovery from an actual physical illness, well, not illness, a break like Laura has, which we'll get into that as well. So, okay, so you found applied quantum biology through your studies, and how did you go down the rabbit hole of the primitive reflex integration? And tell us what that actually is, because I think a lot of our listeners will not know what it is.
Okay. So let me answer the first question first. It was early on in our homeschool life, and we were out in the woods. 3 other moms and I started an outdoor nature program for kids. And we would basically spend a whole day once a week out in the woods and letting the kids play and self-directed learning and all that kind of stuff, trying to foster what I alluded to earlier, this innate, ability to learn that we're all born with. And I was chatting with one of these moms about her kid and some therapy that this kid was getting because of behavioral issues and so on and so forth. And she mentioned the name of who is now a very near and dear to my heart mentor who I'm working with. I'm apprenticing under. His name is Dave Boyland, and he works here in the central New York area. It turns out my husband had met him before on the sidelines of a football game that they were covering together. And so it's just a beautiful thing, how community works and networking. Anyway, bottom line is she mentioned this thing, rhythmic movement training. And I was like, my interest was piqued. It kind of parked it in the back burner. And fast forward a few months, I was outside feeding my chickens and I threw my back out. I leaned over and I stayed leaned over, and I was crooked and in pain. And I've struggled with pain since my early teens when, I was in the throes of trying to become a piano performer, preparing for a competition and all that kind of stuff. And I woke up one morning, my wrists were swollen. They were painful. I couldn't move. It was really, really intense. I didn't know what was going on. Over the next 15 years or so, doctors, treatments, changing piano techniques a bazillion times. I actually had started as a piano performance major in college, but I switched to music composition because I couldn't play. But all that, to say I've been dealing with chronic pain since I was 13, 14, 15 years old. I took some medication. It got things under control. I was diagnosed at some point, finally 10, 15 years in, with what they called juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. Bilateral, only affected my wrists. In retrospect, I have so many other views on what all that was, right? But anyway, thankfully, beautifully, I was able to get off whatever medication I was taking, got pregnant, we have 2 healthy kids. It all worked out beautifully. But the pain and the on and off discomfort and wondering what was going on, and my body kept doing these things, and it was very frustrating, was always there. So I threw my back out. I went to Dave. I said, hey, can you help me? He's like, absolutely. And he started sharing with me these rhythmic movements. He had me get on the floor at one point and just extend my legs out and bring my feet in towards the middle. We call these windshield wipers. And I'm looking at him thinking, what are you having me do? This is nuts. This is ridiculous. He's just do it. Don't worry. He walked away, checked on somebody else, came back. And my frontal lobes are firing on all cylinders. I'm trying to figure out what on earth is going on. He didn't tell me. He didn't tell me for 3 sessions. But all along, I'm doing these movements and I'm noticing, okay, something's happening. One night, 2 weeks in or so, I woke up with terrible sciatica. I'd had sciatica when I was in the middle of, in graduate school, trying to get my thesis done and all that kind of stuff. It landed me in the ER at that time, the works. I was like, I can't afford this. I have 2 young kids. We got to do this. I can't be laid up. So it was 1 a.m. I got out of bed. I got on the floor next to my bed and I started doing these rhythmic movements. And all of a sudden I realized not that the pain was gone, because the pain wasn't gone, but I wasn't afraid. The fear that pain used to elicit in me, I was like, oh my gosh, what did I miss? What did I do? What did I eat? What did I not eat? What am I doing wrong? Do. That fear was just gone. It was the coolest thing. And I went back to Dave whenever my next appointment was, and I shared that with him, and he smiled and he started nodding. And he, he does these things. He doesn't say much, but wonderful way of learning. And that was the beginning of me saying, okay, I have to learn more about this. What is this? So later that year, Kate Wagner, the US distributor for BRMT USA, was coming up to my town to give a level 1 course. This is 2 months later, right? After I started doing them. So I said, okay, I got to do this. A dear friend of mine and I signed up. We took the course together. This was fall of 2019. And I've never looked back. COVID hit. It didn't stop Kate. She kept going virtual to the best of her ability. This stuff is best learned hands-on in person, but there are certain components of it that, work either way. And that was wonderful for me because I just devoured this material and applied it, and then started working with Dave, and it, it's been beautiful. I'm a consultant now for BRMT USA, and I'm mentoring under Kate to become a full-on instructor for the institution. So now we're co-teaching, just learning and getting practice. But this is a beautiful tool that is being shared. Initially, they started teaching this stuff to PTs and OTs, school teachers, special ed, PE, speech therapists in school, social workers. But it's become this thing now. It's all over the world in many different countries. And I took it as a parent, and as a person that wanted to apply it for myself. But there's trauma workers, body workers, dentists. It's just one of those things that applies to everything because primitive reflex integration is so essential to our development. And so, second question, what are primitive reflexes? Primitive reflexes I call them our superpower. So as the word reflex entails, it's a movement that we don't think about when we do. We do the movement in response to a stimulus. And the easiest explanation is, everybody's had experience cooking and burning their finger. And so what happens when you get close to the hot source, you move your hand away, you're not thinking about it. Because if you think about it, it's too late. So primitive reflexes are movements that we start doing in utero. And the earliest reflex, not officially a primitive reflex, but an intrauterine withdrawal reflex, is the fear paralysis reflex that people have noticed at about 5 weeks gestation. Okay. And so from then on, during the 9 months gestation, and then postnatally for the first 24 months after, so year 1, year 2, we go through these stages of being able to do movements that we don't think about in response to a stimulus. And one reflexive movement sets the stage for the next one to happen. And then that one sets the stage for the next one. And every time a new reflex appears, more and more development is happening. More and more areas of the central nervous system become linked up and start talking to each other. And when I give this class and this talk, I talk about, as a neuroanatomist, I cringe, but it's the best way to explain it to lay people. I divide the brain into 4 layers, the bottom unconscious portion of our brain, the brain stem, and then another layer 2, I call it the basal ganglia, which is, movement central. And then the limbic system kind of comes as an umbrella over the whole thing. And then lastly, for us, human mammals, the cortex, right? All those layers in a healthy individual that is operating and, firing on all cylinders, all those layers have to be talking to each other constantly. This conversation goes back and forth. But the foundation for that conversation is laid down during development, courtesy of primitive reflexes. And when primitive reflexes don't disappear in their natural course during development, they can become stumbling blocks for that nervous system that is trying to connect with higher levels but can't. We talk about those primitive reflexes that didn't disappear as active primitive reflexes or retained primitive reflexes. But in an ideal situation, all primitive reflexes disappear and they give rise to postural reflexes. So our ability to sit, to stand, to alternate right and left without thinking about it. All these positions that we're in that we cannot think about while we're paying attention to that blackboard at the front of the class. So think about the ADHD kids. think about, people who can't make the proper decisions. I would imagine, I don't know what the work of rhythmic movement training in the addiction recovery world is, or if there is any. So this is a potentially an untapped resource, India. But think about
Hint, hint.
right. Think about people who can't make the right choices for whatever reason, right? It all goes back to that foundational layer at the level of the brainstem that is intimately talking to the sympathetic system and the parasympathetic system, our automatic, unconscious nervous system, right? And so when those layers are not communicating correctly, then we can't talk to the frontal lobe, which is where our executive function seat is, our ability to make choices, our ability to plan, execute, all that kind of stuff. So this work is really amazing. And the movements that we do in BRMT in particular, because there's a bunch of different schools of thought concerning primitive reflexes. There's a bunch of different tools out there.
That's a question I had.
Yeah.
Just here, I'm learning the different terminology. There's BRMT, RMT, PRI. There's a whole bunch of acronyms. I love acronyms. I'm Air Force.
Oh,
but yeah,
acronyms are a pain in my butt.
But yeah, can you explain the difference between BRMT and RMT? And
yeah, so it all goes back to the Swedish psychiatrist who started this move back a couple decades ago. Harold Blomberg is his name, and he's a psychiatrist in the system in Sweden, seeing all kinds of things. And one of his experiences revolved around observing another therapist working with babies and watching the movements that these babies would do. And just, I'm going to super synthesize this story. But the gist of it was he realized, okay, there's a method to the madness of how the newborn moves. What is it? How is it that this blob, think about a newborn, can go from that to rolling, back to front and front to back, to getting on all fours and crawling and eventually walking. And so he painstakingly documented that progression and noticed the movements that were leading up to each and every one of the milestones, the motor milestones, right? And so the short of it is he comes up with this movement menu. And all these movements is attempts to replicate the movements that the baby does during development during those first 2 years. And so started sharing that. He started trying it in the context of, schools and kids with ADD and ADHD. And then the whole thing blew up in a good way when he started working with kids with autism. And one of his colleagues, who is now sort of carrying the torch in Sweden, because Harold Blomberg passed away a few years ago. This colleague of his, her son was autistic, and he is one of the, subject zero, if you will, for a lot of this stuff. And this gentleman is now in his, I believe, late teens, early 20s, and he's a functioning member of society, and he's got likes and dislikes and can communicate and can do what, normally a similar situation here in the US would not have advanced that much. And so this work that Harold Blomberg has done has been tremendous in the world of autism. And then he started using it in other psychiatric situations, bipolar, schizophrenia, et cetera, et cetera. And so again, it speaks to the power of these movements. I don't know that he was ever able to, I never met him. I only trained under Kate Wagner, who trained directly with him. But in my conversations with her and during my training with her, it was never made clear what the mechanism of action is. And so that's where I dove deep. And that's where the quantum piece comes in, because I have a theory about how this might be working. And I have to preface this with big, big, bold letters. It's my opinion. It's my theory, right? Okay. I have to figure out how we go about testing it. But my theory is that when we do these movements, we are recapitulating movements that we did during development, during a time when we felt safe in our mother's womb and later on. And these movements are also directly affecting our fourth phase water, generating piezoelectricity, recharging that water, bringing more electrons into the system. And so my theory is sort of a multi-fold, multi-stepped approach of addressing that memory bank of trauma and fear that might be stopping us, that might have caused a reflex to become activated again. That memory bank that we understand from the work of Masaru Emoto and Veda Austin and Gerald Pollack is the body water. But we're also addressing our energy bank, which is also our body water, right? And we're doing these movements, and in doing so, we're generating energy by virtue of piezoelectricity. And then again, that whole safety thing, which comes into the autonomic nervous system. So when I work with people in my business, I call it nourish your autonomic nervous system, because that kind of, people get that. If I use the BRMT acronym, they don't get that. It's what it is. And then when they ask more, I tell them, well, this is the tool that I use, so on and so forth. But when I talk to people in the context of let's nourish that nervous system, let's bring things in that will convey a sense of ease, a sense of safety, because when the nervous system feels safe, that's when we heal, right?
100%. We got to tap on that into that parasympathetic nervous system. Would you say that this helps? I mean, you shared it in your story, how you released that fear, like you felt it in your body. Would you say that PRI is a way to release trapped emotions in the body, kind of like emotion code in a way, like on a quantum level, since they say the energy of an emotion can be as big as like an orange, that the primitive reflex movements that you do helps release that? Or
Absolutely, 100%.
okay.
Yeah, so I kind of left my answer halfway there. So BRMT, it stands for Blomberg Rhythmic Movement Training. Dr. Blomberg was the one that originated it. It started out as RMT, Rhythmic Movement Training, and then it became this international organization, RMTI. So you might be seeing that around. And then there are a couple different ones, and I can't remember the acronyms for those, sort of peeled off from the original RMTI and BRMT, and they're doing that on their own. And I know from friends of mine that are taking this, and they are OTs and PTs in the school districts here, that there are a number of other schools of thought for how to integrate primitive reflexes, and they've brought those in. A lot of the movements that these women are having their, 8 and 9-year-old students do, though, in the school setting are really complicated. I was watching her demo one of these, and, Kate and I were saying to her, well, in that one movement, you're addressing 3 different reflexes. and it's really hard for the 9-year-old brain sometimes to parse that out. You're not logically thinking about it, but it's really tricky. And so what I like about it compared to all the other ones is that the movements are really simple. Not wanting to offend anybody, I will say this, they look dumb. They're like, are you serious? This is like, so how is this helping? In this world of more is more and all that kind of stuff. But they're so simple.
So it reminds me of Bowen technique. I went to see somebody for a while, and I thought, what? Like, there's so little to this,
Yeah.
And then I also do a technique called bars, and it's the same thing. You think, really? Like, can this? And they work. I can tell you, they work.
They do. Yeah. And this is a tool, I think, one of many that people can add to their arsenal. Sometimes, I'm not, anything else that people have trained in is amazing. And the key here, and the beauty of a provider and a practitioner, is their ability to discern when one tool fits in or not, right?
Right.
But BRMT, you can do it on a baby while you're changing their diaper. I mean, it's, of all the primitive reflex integration techniques out there, this is the only one that you can do with infants, because it's so simple and so straightforward.
And you can't interfere with their own progression? Like,
no, totally the opposite.
Yeah, you can't mess it up.
Especially infants that come into this world by way of a traumatic birth experience, whatever that might look like, right?
C-section.
Exactly.
Okay. So one of the things I just want to say before we go off of this topic is I kind of formed this statement. I just want to make sure it's accurate. So you let me know if it's accurate. Would you say that the exercise assists with then the communication of the 4 layers? So if we do have somebody who's coming into this world, maybe it's a small child or baby, infant, newborn that is addicted to opiates. And if one could do these little movements, these exercises, it would help nourish their nervous system right out the gate.
Yes,
Oh, that's so awesome.
hard
That,
stop.
how cool.
Mhm.
Very cool.
Yeah. There's a lot to unpack there, right? With a baby who's born from an addict mama.
Yeah, I
I
know.
don't have any experience with that, but
Yeah.
from my understanding of how from what I've seen in other situations, from my understanding about how I believe it's working, absolutely. In fact, I learned this from my mentor. We don't work with kids until we work with a mom or the dad.
Yeah.
We, a parent comes to us saying, hey, can you help my kid? Absolutely. But you're going to stay here and you're going to watch and you're going to do this with your kid. In fact, how about we do 1 or 2 sessions with you alone first? Because, and I say this with all the love in the world for everybody out there, because I was that mom. Until I started doing the work myself, it didn't matter how many times my kids rocked a day. They see you doing this, they see you taking charge of your own health, and almost that alone is enough to spark change in the child that is observing you, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, and it'd be interesting to see, to what degree moms that you might see, Andia, are willing even to do this. But from what Nico was saying, if I understood her correctly, a lot of the times a pregnancy is the spark that these addict moms need to snap out of it, right? And to do the work. So
yeah. Everyone's precipitating event is different and speaks to them differently of how they come into recovery. So yeah. And
Amanda,
often,
yes.
just on the rocking, we can keep going on the recovery, but on the rocking, I had 2 babies that had rough deliveries. One was C-section and the other one was mid forceps and 39 hours of labor. But we had a cradle that we had by the bedside for the first 4 months. That was a question I had, and I also had a rocking chair that I would sometimes nurse or just hold them and rock. Do you think they're great tools? Is that helping these primitive reflexes?
I think absolutely. I mean, they say especially the first trimester postnatal is the 4th trimester, And so I wish, for example, I had known this with my first child. I did implement it more with my second child, but wearing the baby is such a beautiful, beautiful thing for a variety of reasons. And I believe that this is one of them. The rocking movements, the rhythmic movements that we do in BRMT aren't necessarily that, but I believe that wearing a baby and the rocking and so on and so forth are actually activating similar pathways and conveying that sense of safety, that sense of connection with mom, hearing the heartbeat, all that kind of stuff. So absolutely. Yeah.
awesome. All right. So I think that if I was listening to this podcast right now, I'd be like, well, I want to know what some of these reflexes are, and I want to know what some of these exercises look like. So maybe, yeah, just name some of these reflexes to us. Some of the common ones.
Well,
I mean,
the
there's,
one
go
that
ahead.
I like, because I first heard of it in the context of spinal cord injury, which is what I did for many years, is the Babinski reflex.
Yes.
Right? So the Babinski reflex is a reflex that in a spinal cord injured individual, it manifests as the toes are fanning open.
Yes.
Okay. During development, when our motor system is developing, by the time we're born, a lot of that nervous system is still, a lot of those neurons, especially the long axon neurons that are connecting the brain with the foot, are still not myelinated. They're not wrapped up in that insulating material. And so that happens over the first 2 years of life. And so that's why a baby can't walk and weight bear, because their descending motor tracts are not completely developed yet. Now, initially, you'll see a newborn baby with their toes splayed open. And that's a normal thing. And then they're going to start playing with their toes, especially when they're nursing. They are working 3 or 4 different reflexes at the same time, the plantar reflex and the Babinski reflex. So watch a nursing baby and their feet are doing all kinds of cute little things. But in addition, their Babkin, one of the and palmar, hand reflexes are massaging mother's breast while they're doing that. And in addition, all the mouth reflexes are developing in the process of sucking and nursing. All of these things happen together. So a lot of kids who have an active Babinski reflex way beyond the time when they should, one question to ask the parent is what was their nursing like? Did they nurse or were they bottle fed? How did that whole thing go? Kids who, with all the mouth reflexes, if a lot of those are active, you're going to see a lot of teeth grinding, mouth breathing, TMJ issues because those mouth reflexes did not integrate properly. Let me think. Well, more to the work that I do, chronic pain in older individuals, we have to go in utero. And what are the reflexes that develop in utero? That intrauterine response, withdrawal reflex, the fear paralysis reflex, which sets the stage, in my opinion, for the entire autonomic nervous system. Okay. When the fear paralysis reflex develops at about five weeks gestation, it'll take about, a few more weeks, 2 months. By week 12 gestation, so month 3, it should disappear, but in order to give rise to what we know as the Moro reflex. And all of us have seen the Moro in action, perhaps. If nothing else, the best example that I can think of is baby monkey holding on for dear life to mama monkey while mama's running through the jungle, getting food or whatever. This Moro reflex is what gets the baby to grab on. For those people who have babies who might be listening or who had babies, anytime you were changing your baby's diaper and all of a sudden they would kind of do this. That's a withdrawal reflex of sorts. It's a bona fide primitive reflex, but it is a very essential survival reflex. We need it because our systems developed to hold on to something in the face of danger. When that Moro reflex becomes active again, or if it doesn't integrate ever into the lifelong tendon guard reflex, which will set the foundation for fight, flight, or freeze, then you end up with people with issues in that department, in that arena. And that's the bulk of what we do.
Sorry, in tendons? They have issues with tendons?
Well, they could. So knee issues, flipping your ankle a lot, weak ankles, tight back, tight neck, the tendon guard.
Is it Ehlers-Danlos potentially, like just really loose ligaments?
That's a very good question. It could be the body's extreme response to tension is to just go completely floppy. The best example I can think of tendon guard is one that Kate Wagner always shares with her students, which is the Brazilian representative for BRMT is either a jiu-jitsu master or one of those martial arts. And the initial position that he gets into before any fight is the epitome of a tendon guard, of a full-blown, tendon guard. And what happens is that can be a very disruptive thing for everyday life. And that's been the thing that I've been working through as I apply this to my own body is, okay, I'm out for a walk, I'm trying to work out, and then I come home and I'm all stiff. Or I'm out for a walk and all of a sudden my hip starts hurting. It's a learned protective behavior from who knows when I was a kid, maybe, and I fell and hurt myself, or when I slipped on black ice in graduate school. I mean, who knows, right? But the body will protect me. The body will defend me. And so when I'm out doing something that is technically not harmful or dangerous, the body will start responding the way it learned. And so a lot of this work and doing these rhythmic movements goes to the heart of the issue, which is reminding the nervous system that it is safe. And some people need that, and that's what we do in the office, in the clinic. I'm to the point where I just put my hand on my hip while I'm walking and I say, hey, no, it's okay. We're good. I'm safe. But this is all a whole process and everybody has a different way of getting there. And, so the Moro reflex and the tendon guard reflex are some of the reflexes.
I took a list here. You've said most of them. Well, some of them. Sonic neck reflex.
Yep, the STNR.
Right, and then tonic labyrinth.
Tonic labyrinthine reflex. These are very important for, upper body and neck. The STNR, we like to say, divides the body into upper and lower body. So somebody who's got an active STNR will often present with a lot of upper back issues, neck issues, They can't separate their hips from the rest of their body for the life of them. Then there's the spinal galant
Sorry,
reflex.
what do you mean by that?
Well, they're so stiff. They're so stiff. You know, it's the flat bottom. The arches of the back are not properly, formed. They've adapted to the best of their ability. And again, I want to stress the adaptations that the body engages in, including activating a reflex, are a healing response. It's what the body knows to do in order to keep the system working properly.
So Amanda,
But
when say you have a client
Mm.
and can you do this virtually where you can actually, have their camera on, look at their back and see if it's flat or if they have a flat bum, and you can actually do these appointments virtually? They don't
yeah,
have to be in person. Are they better
no,
in person?
always
Yeah.
because of the hands-on. Some of the things that we do that Dr. Blomberg brought in from other disciplines like Touch for Health and Brain Gym involve some hands-on things. One of them is naval radiation. And naval radiation is sometimes the only thing that we do for somebody who's in hardcore fight or flight, and they can't do anything else, and they won't. And so we just need to bring ease into the system, and they are willing to allow us to put our hands on them. We have them lying prone so that their faces are covered because they need all that safety cocoon, if you will, right?
You called it navel, as in our navel that
Yep, as in
separated
our belly
from,
button.
as in separated from our moms way
Mhm.
back when? Okay.
Yep,
Is that
yep.
the link?
That's the link.
No pun intended?
No
Okay.
pun intended.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
And it's cool because the more we work with people, the more I work with people, the more I begin to make these connections, but it's not necessary for them to understand the connection. And that became really apparent to me. What sealed the deal was this quote that I read somewhere by a woman who does spinal flow technique somewhere in Florida. Her name is Dr. Sharina. And she posted on social media, I hate to admit, the language of the nervous system is not words, it's sensations. And that really blew it open for me. I was like, okay, I get it. I got it before, but now I truly get it deep in my bones. Okay. I don't have to explain this unless they want to. I don't have to rationalize it. I just have to be willing to guide them through these movements so that their bodies can feel. And that's what happened to me that night at 1 a.m. when I felt the sciatica pain coming on and I got out of bed and onto the floor and started rocking. I was so tired and exhausted and worried that I couldn't rationalize my way. And that's where I needed to be. I needed to be willing to not rationalize it. And when I gave that up, quote unquote, that's when things clicked.
So I'm having these challenging nights right now with a broken tibia plateau, and I can't move. I'm lying there on my back, and I literally have a 45 degrees I can move in. Right now, I see a surgeon next week to see what else I can do, or if I'm having surgery. Pray I don't. But that's been hard, and it's woken up. I had a bad knee injury 40 years ago, and that, trauma is like, wow, it's all back, refreshed of the horrible nights I had with that, full length cast. And yeah, so it's interesting. One of the things I did was I've lifted myself up and just rocked my hips, because it's not much movement,
No,
but it's something, right?
yeah.
It's trying to just, and it's been, move my toes a little bit. It's like I'm someone who moves a lot. I'm not very sedentary, which probably I need to see you to figure out why is it I need to create so much piezoelectricity and move so much. But
So it's an active reflex. It's an ADHD. It's your system
yeah,
doing what it needs to do to generate that movement because it's not getting it for whatever reason. And that's an active reflex. Who knows
right.
which one it is? But I'd be curious if when you're lying in bed, if to the best of your ability and more with the non-injured leg than with the injured one, don't worry about symmetry. Forget about, oh, but my injured leg isn't moving as much. No, forget about it. The body will eventually work it out. But if you were to lie in bed with your legs straight and just bring your toes to touch in the middle.
Okay.
Gently, right?
Right.
Imagine that the movement is coming from your hip joint, not from the ankle. Okay,
Yeah.
so if I were in person, I'd have my hands on your shins, on your shins, and I'd be kind of moving your legs so that you get the feel of the hip joint is the one kind of bringing things in, not the ankles, right? And just gently do this, right? Super gently, always breathing. Another thing that you may be familiar with, but I'll share it anyway, is just what I call pretzel breathing or hookups. This is from the Touch for Health program. out there, which is a kinesiology-based program. But you basically cross your arms and bring them in and cross your legs, one ankle over the other. And based on your knees right now, you decide which side feels better. And you can just close your eyes, turn into this fetal position type thing that you're recapitulating, and breathe, right?
Breathe. Okay.
And especially at night when you're having trouble sleeping, I'd be curious to find out how this helps, if at all. And just breathe, and it slows everything down, right? What you could do sitting, when sitting is comfortable, is, to the best of your ability, place your feet on the ground.
Yeah, it's going to be 6 weeks.
Is now what's going on? Your leg is straight out?
Yeah. I'm in a
Yeah.
splint. Yeah, straight
Okay.
leg, non-weight
Yeah.
bearing. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm a little bit limited there.
No, but it's okay. Even if one leg is out, the other one is a little bent, place your hands on your knees,
Okay.
and then just inhale and open your chest, and then exhale and become a little ball. Inhale and exhale and become a little ball. Movements that are targeting that, moral reflex, for instance, breathing.
That's what it's
Right?
targeting. Okay.
Mhm.
Because I was thinking it's the fear paralysis reflex.
Could be.
Could be, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, Moro is out of whack, whether it's because fear paralysis never integrated or what, because one leads to the next,
Yes.
right?
Okay.
And so for the people that are interested, you can go down that rabbit hole and try to connect the dots and figure out the linkages. But what I love about this work is that it's not necessary.
Right. You just do it.
Just do it.
Got
Yeah.
it. Oh, this is so
Yeah.
interesting, Amanda. So interesting. I have a question. It's a quote, and you've kind of answered it, but it would be nice. I'm just going to dig it up. It's Dr. Blomberg's. I was right near the beginning here. I'll capture it here. Okay. He said, and I'm just asking what he means by this. If you do not struggle on the floor in the first years of life, you will struggle through life. What does that mean?
Well, the best example is tummy time for the baby. When you put your babies on their stomach early on, they hate it.
Right.
But what's happening there is so much, actually.
Oh.
The stimulus of the floor against their belly, their body weight on the floor and the floor pushing up against the belly, is causing them to go into a full Landau position, which is the Landau reflex, which is so important for developing that posterior chain, but also for helping with alignment of the vertebral column, strength of the neck. Again, the baby isn't lifting his or her head up because they have strong neck muscles, like I used to think. They're doing this in response to the stimulus that they're getting on their front from the floor. But also, when you see a 4, 5, 6-month-year-old doing this, they're actually honing in on something that they see over there that they want, but they can't have. They can't reach. A little toy, the binky, mom. Okay, so there's a whole lot of this, a vision coordination that is developing in the process of tummy time. There's not just muscle strength, right? But the eyeballs, the extraocular muscles are establishing all these connections in the brainstem that allow the eyes to move horizontally, to move vertically, to move, to accommodate with far vision and near vision. All that is happening while the baby's struggling on the floor. When we don't allow kids to have tummy time, for instance, or to figure out how they're going to bring one knee under one hip and the other knee under the other hip in order to crawl, they will never develop everything else that develops in the process. Most importantly, vision. And so then you end up with kids with glasses at 3 because of vision issues. Then you end up with kids sitting in the back of the classroom, can't see the board, and therefore they become the disruptors of the classroom. And even if they are not having behavioral issues, they're having learning issues, dyslexia. They struggle to keep their eyes on one line in the book, and so they kind of go down on the page of a book. These are the kids that can't write on one line, and so they're going to start writing and going down the page based from where they started. All of these things have to do with vision development or lack thereof if the proper primitive reflexes didn't get established or didn't develop and didn't integrate when they were supposed to. So I believe that's a lot of what Dr. Blomberg was getting at with that statement.
So as an adult, it's interesting now, seems to be a greater movement, less aerobics and things like that to Pilates, like on the ground. Alexander technique, something I learned
Mhm.
years ago. There's also another podcast, the Align podcast. He's really big on, getting yourself to do things like to sit on the floor as
Mhm.
adults, and
Mhm.
I wonder how much, I don't know if it's going to make up for these reflexes we didn't have, or to help keep
I
things
would
in check.
imagine it will help keep things in check, especially because, one of the things that we have to preserve at all costs as we age is that hip flexor function, right?
Yeah.
Such a
Yeah.
bare bones essential movement, right? But all that is connected to primitive reflexes. Babinski,
Oh, right.
plantar, knee issues are primitive reflex issues, Laura.
They are. Mine,
Yeah,
I was doing so well too, just before this happened.
it's okay.
Well, yeah, I'm so excited to have these, tools.
Yeah.
I've got more questions. Okay, going back in time. If someone, I don't know if I learned about this. I went on one of the websites, the BRMT website. If someone bedwets past the age of 5,
Mhm.
is that a hint of an inactive reflex?
Mhm.
And is there anything that maybe long term they might be affected, and what can they do?
Spinal galant is the first reflex that comes to mind there.
Okay.
And that one needs the passage through the birth canal in order to, continue in its development and establishment and then eventual integration.
Okay.
So integrating the spinal galant would be very important. Spinal galant, if active, bedwetting is just one of the many things. Scoliosis can develop. Langs, Laura.
That's okay. I guess the question, so it was me, I bedwet till like 9.
Mhm.
And that was a little traumatic because my poor mom was frustrated. I was like one of 4 kids, and you know, she'd walk in and go, "Oh, do the sheets again," right? And I didn't want it. I was embarrassed by it, but couldn't help it. Just wondering, I wonder if I did have a natural delivery, like I was born with natural delivery. Just curious if, I mean, I grew out of it, thank God, but I wonder, is there anything bladder related now that might even be, you know, affected with that, if that reflex isn't strong would you say strong as it should be, or
Active. It's
active,
either
as active as it
active
should
or not. Yeah. And I don't know. I think if you grew out of it, something happened around those years that helped your brain link up.
be? Yeah.
Basal ganglia and descending inhibitory connections were able to tell that particular reflex circuit, okay, you can quiet down now. We're going to take over.
Okay.
Those are the kids that, don't like feeling the tags, and they're constantly, squirming and wiggling and all that kind of stuff, and so many
Uh,
different things.
and okay, these reflexes, how do you test them? Like, do you have a comprehensive assessment that you do? How long does it take?
Some do. So when we teach the level 1, level 2, level 3 BRMT, and then the diet and whatever, I forget,
Hello?
2 and 3 page long forms that
Okay.
some people love to do because they need it. I am learning how to, but we also encourage all these people who take these courses, especially the therapists, to just get comfortable watching the person. How are they walking when they come through the door of your office? One of the things that I've learned from my mentor is to observe them as they're walking from the car to the door, for instance, because I can see through the window. How are they moving? What's going on with the head? What's going on with the foot? When they come in, there's a whole lot of time spent conversing. How are you being? How did your week go? What's going on? And all the time I am learning to look at their eyes. What are their pupils doing? Are they dilated? Are they not? What's their skin doing? Is it getting red or not? Their ears. Are they fidgeting? Can they sit still? Can they not? All of these little things we learn during training to make note of, because that is the best assessment. When you sit down and start asking specific questions, especially adults, they can start adjusting and readjusting. I know I did. Oh, I know what she's going for with that. No, I don't have that problem. So I'm going to change my answer and all that kind of stuff.
Oh,
How are your dreams? Do you remember your dreams? You know, there's a bunch of questions that we share with people who take the course that they can incorporate into their intake, depending on how they're structured. So a lot of the teachers have to have these for IEP purposes and for reporting to the school district. So yes, the short answer is there's a bunch of intakes. There's different ways to test for the reflexes. The best one is to just observe your client as they're moving, as they're interacting with you. But there's specific movements, specific stimuli that we learn to deliver in order to test them too, and those we teach in the course.
So yeah, my question, next question you just answered. You are a teacher of this. You're just not
Yes,
a practitioner
yeah, I'm training to be one of the instructors for the organization, yeah.
for BMRT.
For BRMT USA, yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Good stuff.
Yeah, and in fact, as a little plug, if you will allow me, the next BRMT level 1 and level 2 course happening in my area for anybody that's in the New York area is coming up in November. First weekend of November. Kate Wagner, the US distributor, is going to come up here. She's already been up here twice this year, but people are interested. There are a lot of teachers, a lot of therapists that hadn't learned about this yet, and now the word's getting out. So she's coming up and we're getting ready to teach it again. And those are 2 intensive days of hands-on, but we've also done level 1 hybrid. So a lot of people out west would plug in via Zoom to our live in-person course. So we have the setup and the capability to do that as well.
That was my question. Is it hybrid?
Yes, Andy, yeah, it is. And hopefully, yeah. So
Oh,
one of my best friends
go ahead.
forever is in Oregon. And she took level 1 via Zoom for the first time earlier this year. And she's a PT kinesiologist, personal trainer. She's starting up her coaching business. And this has been a key piece that she's introduced into her practice. And so when we offered it again a few months later, she actually flew all the way from Oregon to New York to take it in person because she's just realized, okay, this is worth it. But she started out hybrid, virtual.
And tell me she's in Portland.
Yes, she's in the outsides of Portland. I need to connect you with her.
Yes. So, friend, if you're listening, hello. Meet you.
You know who you are. Yeah.
India, I just love you.
Well, this just this whole I wrote down, this just gives a whole level to everything's connected. Like it's a whole level. Like
I know. Well,
we learn in quantum that everything's connected, and you've just connected it even more.
Well, the thing for me, when I started learning about light, the light pathways, going to the suprachiasmatic nucleus and the hypothalamus, and then the paraventricular nucleus, and all these kinds of, the hypothalamus is right here relative to the brainstem. The brainstem is the part of our nervous system that houses the entire circuitry for primitive reflexes. But in addition, what else does a brainstem house? It houses the circuitry for innervating the extraocular muscles of the eye. They're all hanging out there together. And the vagus nerve, our parasympathetic outflow, lives in the medulla, in the brainstem also. And so the fact that it's all there, location, 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 right? The motto in real estate, they're all there. They're hanging out together. They're talking to each other together. And the fact that the light coming in through the eyes is having a direct effect on our brain clock, which is so close to the circuitry for the primitive reflexes, tells me that there's got to be something more going on there. I don't know what it is. But then to boot, you have CSF, which is 4th phase water. You have all the intracellular water in our neurons and in our supportive astrocytes and other glial cells in the nervous system. All of this it's all there. It's all together. To me, I just love it because it makes sense. It's just one other way of encouraging that 4th phase water system, that memory bank system, that safety net system.
And then speaking of connection, I think I heard you speak on the fascia as well, that this is all communicating through the fascia.
Exactly. That's my theory. Yep. That's my theory.
Okay.
Again, because think about fascia. In the gross anatomy lab, when we were doing cadaver dissections, fascia was dried out, dehydrated, and we would cut through it in order to get to the important stuff like the heart and the lungs and the gut and the whatever. But in real life, we now know that fascia is not dehydrated, far from it. It is essentially collagen braids that are surrounded by water, and it is courtesy of that water hydration shell that fascia can do what it does. But when you start thinking about fascia, not just from the standpoint of a pillowcase that encases a muscle, right, which is how we learned it in medical school, graduate school, but fascia is this interconnected network, like Jim Oshman says in his papers, of the macro collagen triple helices down to the extracellular matrix proteins that are, the substance outside every single cell. And then when you cross the cell membrane, integrins, these proteins that are transmembrane proteins, are connecting the outside of the cell to the inside of the cell. That's part of the fascial system. And then when you get inside of the cell, you have the actin cytoskeleton. That's fascia at a microscopic level. And then you keep bringing it down to the nano and then to the subatomic particle level. Yes, absolutely, we are all connected. And I think it was Joe Ashman that said that fascia is the only organ that touches every single other organ and every single cell in our bodies. And when you're rocking, when you're doing the windshield wipers tonight, Laura,
I will be.
There's this fascia, not only at the level of subskin and around the muscles, but as you're doing these movements, the neurons that are allowing you to do the movement, that are conveying whatever sensations you're feeling and you're picking up and taking them up to your brain, those neurons are surrounded by fascia, are filled with fascia type matrices. So it's just a thing of beauty to think, okay, when I'm doing these movements, I'm generating piezoelectricity that is charge separating the water around my fascia, that is generating a thicker exclusion zone, a bigger exclusion zone, bigger battery.
Awesome. Very cool.
Oh my gosh.
I'm glad you got some tips, Laura.
I did. I've been doing the windshield wipers a little bit already, as much as I can with the splint here, but
I guess the one thing I want to add, and then, we can start wrapping up if you ladies
Yeah.
want, is the motto in the business is less is more. Just like with anything quantum, we think that nothing is happening, and yet so much is happening at a level that we still cannot comprehend or measure. The same with BRMT, less is more. So now that you've done a few windshield wipers, Laura, just give it a rest for a bit.
Yeah, okay.
Don't
Which
overdo
makes
it
even
because
more quantum, because quantum's all about the smallest, the biggest result, right? So
Right.
it's very fitting.
Wait, before we wrap up, I just want to talk about the possibilities with this. And
Mm.
in terms of conditions, I have heard you talk about a connection between I call PD and ADHD, but Parkinson's disease.
Yep.
Could you talk about that a little bit and just other, I mean, my mind's exploding, right? Stroke, concussion, trauma, anxiety, cardiovascular disease. Yeah, any thoughts on what it can't, I guess, help? Can and can't?
So this work originally started in the world of ADHD and autism, right? With Dr.
Okay.
Blomberg.
Right.
And because he was a psychiatrist, he also used it in other psychiatric conditions with different degrees of success. There's so much that goes into it. I'm seeing it, I'm using it, and I'm seeing it in the clinic where I work once a week for recovery post joint replacement surgery, individuals with all kinds of different trauma, emotional and otherwise, cardiovascular accidents, so strokes, heart conditions. People are coming off their heart meds. And when you think about what Dr. Hussey talks about, and when we understand what Dr. Stephanie Seneff talks about in the context of zeta potential of red blood cells and so on and so forth, you start realizing it's all connected to the autonomic nervous system. And so when you nourish the autonomic nervous system, and this is a beautiful tool to do that, you begin to see benefits, including lowering of blood pressure and so on and so forth. I've been using it in the context of metabolic syndrome, individuals with diabetes. What else? Chronic pain, my example. It's a wonderful adjunct to treat different seizure disorders.
Wow.
Endocrine issues. Of course, behavior issues of all kinds, especially in little kids, school-age kids, dyslexia, and any other reading disabilities.
What about your roots with spinal cord? Like I know I saw that you published 5 papers with spinal cord.
Directly, I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. It'd be fascinating to see, because a lot of the first 6 movements that we teach in the course are passive. So what that means is that they are hands-on, the provider is moving you. So you're not doing anything. And those passive movements are spectacular for using in newborns. That's why this is the one tool, primitive reflex tool that we can use with babies. But they're also incredible for using with individuals who can't move. So paralysis for different reasons, right? Stroke, tumor, etc. Yeah, it's almost like the sky's the limit. It sounds like a panacea, kind of like red light therapy, but honestly, I think there's something there, and it's just a matter of people daring to try it out. Cerebral palsy, big in cerebral palsy.
Oh, wow. Okay. We've got
Mhm.
a dear friend with that. Okay.
Yeah. There's some providers down in Brazil who are combining BRMT with equine therapy for CP kids.
Very cool.
So it's really an amazing thing. It's almost like the provider's ability to trust is the limit. I think if you're in a place where you realize, okay, this body knows what to do, and I'm here to come alongside and support it for however long or however short, I'm just going to go where the situation is guiding me, and I'll trust.
Okay, just
That's
going to bring it back
beautiful.
to the quantum before we finish up.
Mhm.
So I heard you say that the founder, Dr. Harry, well, the founder of BRMT,
Harold
Dr.
Blomberg,
Harry
yeah.
Blomberg, he would refuse to work with patients that would not give up a couple things because is that maybe because he couldn't get results? Could you talk
Yep.
about that?
I'm so glad you brought it up because I wanted to talk about it and I got sidetracked. Yeah,
Okay.
Dr. Blomberg got far enough with this work that he realized that diet and exposure to man-made electromagnetic frequencies had big deleterious effects on every patient that he was trying to work with rhythmic movement training. And so he got to the point where he said, if you don't agree to also change your diet and mitigate non-native EMF exposure, then there's not much I can do to help you. And so that was my key to thinking, okay, fourth phase water is the connector here,
Yeah.
right?
Oh,
Yeah.
I love that. All that connection right there. Oh, wait, we want to respect Amanda's time today.
Yeah.
So Amanda, I wanted to ask you our signature question. What does quantum healthy mean to you?
That's a cool question. Quantum healthy to me means rediscovering ease. What do I need to do in my day-to-day to be at ease, to be at rest? Not dead rest, not, lack of energy in the system rest, but again, to quote Dave Boylan, active rest. Rest within the activity. That to me is the epitome of a quantum healthy lifestyle. You can do what you need to do, deal with the stresses that come at you, but you still have that rest, because that means that, okay, my nervous system is where it needs to be. Not always even keel, right? I will get into sympathetic as I need to, but I will come out of it when it's done.
Awesome. So
Hopefully that.
beautiful.
Awesome. Wow, that was a whole new take, Andia.
Yes, it was beautiful. Now
Original.
you shared a little bit about what your offerings are. You shared one. Is there anything else you want to share before we let you go?
What did I share
You
with you?
you shared that in November you're going to be having a training.
Yes. Thank you.
But we'll put links in the show notes so people can find you. But is there
Mhm.
anything else you wanted to highlight?
Well, I work one-on-one with people. I do in person here near where I live, but also virtual. And I've been doing a lot of BRMT virtually, and it's been beautiful. There's been a lot of different experiences and presentations, if you will, and it's been a wonderful opportunity for me to test this in different settings to confirm that it really works. But I also am really trying to grow a group coaching offering. And
Good
it's a
idea.
hybrid inspired by the way the Applied Quantum Biology Institute set up their thing. So I've put together a foundations course where I have pre-recorded videos talking about active rest, primitive reflexes, nourishing the nervous system. And then there's a handful of other videos about light and how light through a quantum lens affects different areas of our life, including gut health and so on and so forth, thyroid health, adrenal health. And then there's another set of videos in another module where I talk about water. And so those are, in my view, and from what I'm seeing in my practice, the pillars, right? I know Jack Cruz talks about light water magnetism. I think those are all essential, but rest is key. And how do we nourish and encourage that rest, right? So I put together this course, and then part of the group coaching program that I'm trying to grow is people would have access to all of these modules for life. But then in addition, we would meet for live conversations every week, like Q&As on Zoom, where they can ask whatever questions come up as they work through the course, as they start connecting dots. So again, there's other programs out there that are similar, but there's a lot of need in the network that I'm in, and I'm trying to grow that also. And I think that we each bring different strengths to the whole field. So there isn't redundancy. You guys were talking about, well, we don't want to recapitulate the podcast that I recorded a while ago with Meredith, for instance, but every time that we speak, every time that I talk about this stuff, new things come up, new ideas, new dots connect. So
Yeah. Oh, so amazing.
Oh, Amanda, let me thank you in a couple sentences here. Thank you for daring to trust that the body can learn to nourish our automated nervous system for us to rediscover ease. Thank you for everybody that you're helping with chronic pain, including myself, the few tips you gave me today. Thank you for being a quantum mom. You didn't get into this today, but I know that both you, I think, and your husband both helped one of your children with a concussion, I believe. Okay. And just finally, I went on your website, and I don't know if it's on your emails or on your website, but somewhere along the journey, I discovered that you have a mantra that's bloom where you are planted. And I want to tell you, I journaled it. It has helped me so much because I didn't plan to plant myself in this current soil at the moment, but I'm determined to bloom, and it's my mantra right now. So I want to share that. I want other people to hear that. I think that's so beautiful. And I know you started in Argentina as a musician, and somehow you're in New York doing this and working with people that you never thought you would. But thank you for your journey, your suffering, and everything that you're now helping other people with.
Aw, thanks, Laura. Yeah, bloom where you're planted is key.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And your hypotheses, keep them going on easy water and fascia and all connecting all these dots. This is so important.
Yeah, no, it's exciting.
Really exciting.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for listening. You made it to the end, and we will see you next time.
Thank you so much for listening to the Quantum Healthy Podcast. We hope you found some value in this information. And if you feel inspired, please share it and leave us a 5-star review. This will help us reach so many more people. If you want to connect with Laura, you can find her at laurakistmanwellness.com and Ndia at ndiaray.com. Links are below in the show notes. Now, go find some sunlight and embrace your own quantum healthy.